I believe we are live. Hey, besties and bosses, how are you doing? Happy Wednesday. Hope you had, for those of you who took Monday off, I hope you had a nice long weekend. For those of you who didn't, I don't know if you're like me. I always kind of forget it's a holiday, so I had fewer client calls because a lot of my clients took off, but I still kind of like had a half day and worked on some project. Also, my voice is still a little funky. I know last week I was like losing my voice on our call. Turned out I got COVID. I was saying to quite a few clients, and I think I shared this on Instagram. I oh, my hair is a little funky there. I live in New York City, so we were here through COVID, through kind of like the epicenter, like right downtown. I'm now in Dumbo, Brooklyn, but we were downtown in Manhattan during COVID hit. We were here for quarantine lockdown, like we stayed for all of COVID, and I never got it. My husband never got it, or at least we never tested positive for it. And so I thought either maybe I was one of those people who like didn't get the symptoms, was someone who was a carrier, or like I was like joking that like maybe I was a unicorn, and it turns out that was not the case. So I'm on the other side of it. Though I still have a little of the y'all probably have had COVID. You'll have to tell me how that goes. I had a crazy high fever. It was like 103.7 or 104 or something. The body aches and all of that. I believe now I'm way past the contagious phase. I'm like, we've been quarantining, but it's like the congestion like won't go, or like the cough won't go away. So anyway, I have the raspy voice. That is why I feel like I need to give the disclaimer, especially since last week in the middle of our live when I thought I was fine. I was like hacking and I think turning bright red. Anyway, that is not what we were talking about today. That is TMI, but that is what is going on. I'm so happy to have you all. If you are here or on the replay, let me know. I always like to know who's here, and I hope this conversation is valuable for you. This is one of those conversations. It's a bit more of a concept I think about so much, and so much of the work I'm doing with my clients, and don't necessarily have conversations around forward facing. And I think it's such an important topic and conversation, particularly for those of you in this group. So I hope that this lands for you. I hope that this will be permission giving, but also help you to have some tools that maybe are a little different than what you usually hear to help you create the success you want. So I'm just going to dig into this. If you're not on my email list, or if you didn't see the description for this, what I'm talking about is the curse, in air quotes, of the gifted entrepreneur. And I'm going to explain what I mean by that, and the surprising work I do with my clients to help them get big results. So I think the preface for this and what I was sharing is, I have clients, and I've shared this, a client who had their first 500K year. These are all within the last year results. I preface that because we are in a time online where results are funky, so I think it's helpful also to just know what results people are getting currently. A closing a 30K deal, a sold out first time launch with, I believe it was 27 people. So these are all really great, big, like yummy, juicy business results. And what all of these results have in common is not a specific strategy. It's not even a specific like mindset shift or hack. It's not, I was joking in the email, like it's not a viral reel. I don't think any of them had a viral reel. It's not like some 7-step formula that I gave them. But all of these clients, like all of the people I work with, like I'm imagining, most of the people in this group are smart. They're talented, they're high achieving, and many of them have been told at some point in their life that they're gifted, or like we're even in like the gifted and talented program, but if not, have been people where like things generally come easily to them, and that they're great at, like if they apply themselves to something, they can like figure it out pretty easily, or like they got good grades in school, or like they're just used to succeeding at what they do and what they put their mind to. And before you eye roll or hop off this live stream, I think what's important to caveat here is it's not because they're talented and smart, like it's not because they're unicorns that they got those results. It is in spite of that. Because what I think we often don't realize is, if you are someone who is smart, gifted, talented, that things have come relatively easily to you, that is both a great, awesome gift that you have, and there is also a shadow side to every benefit for all of us. There's a curse in air quotes with this. There is some great articles. Actually, one of my friends who's a therapist wrote an article, and I will see if I can find it and link to it. a lot of people who are doing reels online around sort of like if you were told you were gifted and talented growing up, like how's your high functioning anxiety going, I think is kind of the audio clip. But there's a couple great articles about the curse of, I think there's even a book, The Curse of the Gifted Child, but it essentially talks about this, where if you're praised quite a bit as a child for being smart, for being talented, for being good at things, right? You start to set up this expectation that is essentially a fixed mindset that's just sort of like, I'm either good at something or I'm not, and I should be good at something. If something doesn't come easily to me, I'm not good at it. And that can actually create quite a lot of problems when it comes to growing a business and being a CEO. And this can show up and create challenges like procrastination, in some cases, high functioning anxiety or just anxiety, stress, feeling like a fraud, feeling like you're not good enough, really being stuck in a fixed mindset, not a growth mindset, worrying, anxiety, overthinking a lot. I would say even perfectionism and overworking, though sometimes that can be born from different things. So I wanted to dive into that today because I see so much of the work I do with my clients. My clients are those high achievers, and I see so much of the mindset work we're doing is really helping them to navigate what that curse, so to say, is, and how to work with it and how to overcome it and to get results despite it, and to learn that they're not getting results because they've been told they're smart or talented or gifted, but really to see how they're getting results in spite of that and some of the shifts we're making. So I'm going to break down a little bit more about what I mean by that curse. We are going to talk about what some of the work I'm specifically doing with my clients around this is. I think it'll be a little bit surprising, but I think it's actually very helpful to understand. And whether or not you identify as gifted in air quotes, I think this will be helpful and permission giving for you. And then if we have time, we'll see how we go on time. We're going to talk a little bit about what you need to know in your business to stop overthinking and overworking and what creates those big results. Let me just make sure. If you are live, feel free to say hi and let me know if you have questions around this, because I do think it's a slightly different topic that maybe we don't talk about quite a bit. So if you have questions, if you want clarity on any of this, I really want this to support you. I cannot stress enough how much I think if you can understand what we're talking about today, how much this can unlock for you in business. I really see this so-called curse and the shift outside of that as to what is behind so many of my clients' really big results. And I think oftentimes when we're on the outside looking in, we think it's anything but that, right? We think it's because someone was just born with it, so to say, or because they're smart, or because they're talented, or because they're gifted. And that is just really not what I see to be true at all. Something I remind clients about quite a bit, and that I think about quite a bit, because I identify with this as well. I was literally in the gifted and talented program. I was in a magnet school. I graduated high school early. I graduated college year early, top of my class. Like, I am that person. So I identify with this quite a bit. And I've just seen how much of this curse I've had to unwind and how much I've had to really learn how to have a growth mindset and not a fixed mindset, because I think I definitely used to have quite a fixed mindset, and it is so detrimental in business. And I'll explain what I mean between growth and fixed mindset in a second. But the first thing I wanted to share here, and this is just something I will reflect to clients, and I just always remember in business. So you may or may not know this, but I spent 10 years as an actress in Los Angeles. And it was a really interesting experience for me in so many different ways. And so much of what I know in business and what it means to be a CEO and what it means to market and sell, I first learned as an actress, because you're essentially running a small business and you're marketing and selling your talents. And when I moved to LA, when I started acting, I think what I would have told you, what I believed was very much that whoever is the most talented wins, right? Like, if you're the most talented, that's the person who is going to win the Oscar, right? The most talented actor gets the Oscar. The most talented person who auditions gets the role. And the rude awakening I had when I was acting is that talent is everywhere. And not that to like poo-poo talent, but talent is just the bare minimum fucking requirement. And there is so much more that has nothing to do with talent that goes into having a successful acting career, getting paid as an actress, booking work, running that small business, right? Like talent is just like one small part of the overall picture. And in many cases, there were people that didn't even have that much talent who were having a lot of success. And there were a ton of people who were exceptionally talented who were having zero success. And it really helped me to start to see, wow, like this whole idea of like talent is the thing that creates results. Talent is the thing that gets you success. If you're gifted, if you're smart, right? If you're talented, right? Like that's what equals success is just so backwards. But yet that's what I learned in school, right? Like I was rewarded and praised for being smart and and I basically saw that like, oh, if I could like pick things up quickly, if I'm like gifted in air quotes, talented, right? Like that's what creates success. That's kind of only the case in school. It's not the case in business at all. And in fact, what I found acting and what I now see to be true in business and what I support clients around seeing is in many ways, when you have that equation that talent is like being smart, being talented, like being good at what you do is what creates success, as opposed to that's just the bare fucking minimum, excuse my French, but when you have that equation that that's what creates success, that will actually be one of the biggest blocks, one of the biggest hurdles to overcome and one of the biggest things that will prevent you from creating success because it asks you to rely on talent and it also asks you to rely on the expectation that if I can like figure something out quickly and be good at something quickly, that's what creates my success. And if not, if I can't figure something out quickly or if something doesn't happen quickly, I am not successful, right? Which we think about business. So much of business is all about having the growth mindset and the grit, which is the passion and perseverance for a long-term goal. Right? Those are two terms there, but to stay in something, to be able to stick through the learning curve, to do things you've never done before, to get data, right? To test things, to figure things out. It's essentially to be willing to kind of suck at something or to not have something work and to stay in and figure it out to get results. Like that's actually what creates success in business. It's kind of the opposite of what we see with this idea that like talent is what creates results. And if we look at the online space, I'm sure everyone in this group has done that thing where you're scrolling online and there's someone who like started business at the same time as you and they're like killing it and you're like WTF. And if you're really honest, you're like, I swear I'm like more talented than them, or I'm better, like not better than them as a person, but like my offers more service oriented, or I have more experience, or I like bring more to the table, like WTF. And this is part of the WTF and kind of that rude awakening. So this is the first piece here I think is just really important to Emma says, hi Kim, haha, I'm listening to your talk today as I continue to tell myself it's okay, it's taking me a long time to create my webinar, LOL. Oh my gosh, that is like this is the perfect topic for you. This is like the perfect example. I'll circle back to that. I love you so much for saying that. What Emma is saying here, this is exactly it, right? Where it's like just this whole like mindset fuck of like, wait a second, why is it taking me a second to figure something out or to create something in business? If you're someone who's high achieving, but not just high achieving, if you're someone who is smart, talented, and you've been told you're smart and talented, right? You've been rewarded for that. You have that expectation that in general in your life, things come really quickly. It can be really challenging and a little bit confronting. And just what Emma's saying here, when you're doing something like creating a webinar for the first time, and you're like, why is this not the easiest thing in the entire world? Or why am I not like acing this? Or maybe you are acing it, but there's no one to give you that gold star, that A plus, right? Like I think that can just be such a challenge and such a confrontation if you're someone whose whole life has been set up around, I am someone who does a thing and learns it right away and gets the good grade, or I am someone who does a thing and immediately figures that out, or I'm someone who does a thing and kind of always succeeds. I bet most people in this group, but you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but if you feel comfortable sharing, I'd be curious what your thoughts on this. But I bet most people in this group who've had corporate careers or careers before starting your business, I bet y'all killed it. Like I bet you got promotions really quickly. I bet you're really good at what you did. I bet you got raises, right? Like I bet you ran circles around other people in your careers, which is a beautiful thing, right? Like that is a gift. Like that is giftedness, that is talent, those are the strengths you bring into your business. And so those are not things to poo-poo, but the curse of that, right? The flip side of that is starting to realize that with that comes the expectation that everything should happen quickly, that everything should be super easy, that the definition of a fixed mindset, so I'll explain what the difference between a fixed and growth mindset is, but a fixed mindset is essentially the mindset or the belief that it's sort of like I'm just born with it, right? Like I either have a talent or I don't. I'm either good at this or I'm not, right? I either like nail this right away or I don't. That's a fixed mindset. It's sort of like just like thinking that like there's an entrepreneur gene, right? Like you're either born to be an entrepreneur and you're either good at business or you're not. You're either good at acting or you're not, if we use that as an example. You're either good at a sport or you're not, right? Like that's a fixed mindset, right? It means that whatever your current ability or talent, like you are fixed in that place. A growth mindset is the opposite of this. A growth mindset is what we all want to cultivate as business owners. And this is like a little bit of like psychology 101 and a little dorky, but I think it's actually like this right here might be dorky, but this, if you can understand this, the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset and learn how to cultivate a growth mindset, this is what's actually behind my clients getting the 500K launch, closing the 30K deal, right? Having a sold out launch like that. It's shifting from a fixed to a growth mindset. A growth mindset believes that you are not fixed at your level of ability, talent, smartness, success that you are today, and that you are capable of learning, growing, evolving something, right? It is a mastery-oriented mindset. It's sort of the opposite of perfectionism in that it's very much all about, there's a term called deliberate practice, but learning how to deliberate practice, which is essentially learning how to learn and how to master something, what we're doing in business to create bigger and better results. So that shift there, right? When you have the curse of the gifted entrepreneur, you're often stuck in a fixed mindset. And the reason this is a curse is this can become not only a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? If we think that we can't grow, evolve, learn, and if we think we're just supposed to know everything right out the gate, business becomes really fucking hard because most of the skills in business are not skills any of us naturally have. If we think about messaging, who the fuck messages the way we do in business outside of business? I don't know anyone who goes around in day-to-day life talking about like, here's the problem I solve and here's the result I help you get. Like, let me talk about that, right? Like none of us talk business talk in our personal relationships. If we think about marketing and if we think about going out into the online space, and essentially for most of us, what we have to step into is kind of bragging on how great we are at what we do and how we can help people and why someone should give us money. I'm pretty sure that goes against pretty much anyone's, at least in this group's, like natural default setting of who they are. Even if you're a super confident person, right? Most of us in our day-to-day lives aren't going to like cocktail parties where we're like, y'all, hi, it's nice to meet you. I know we just met 3 seconds ago and you're the best friend of my best friend's husband, but let me just tell you how I can solve your problems and why I'm amazing and why you should give me money. Like, here's all my experience and here's why I'm great. And I'm being a little bit dramatic and sarcastic here, but none of us would ever do that at a cocktail party, right? Like in our day-to-day life, even if we're the most confident person in the world, because that just isn't how we socially interact. And yet that's what we're asked to do in business when we show up online, when we market, when we sell. If we think, I do actually think Daniel H. Pink has a book called To Sell is Human. I do think selling is quite human, and all of you are selling all day long in your everyday life, but it is very different to sell your kids on going to sleep, or even if you've had a sales job, right? I cocktail served for 10 years. I was excellent at sales. I would 5 times sell anyone like on the floor behind the bar, and then I worked in advertising. I was excellent at sales there, but it's very different to sell something that is someone else's product or someone else's service. When I was in advertising, I represented directors. I was basically an agent, right? It's very different for me to sell someone else's talent than it is to sell your own talent and your own skills. And so even if we think about that, right, that's a whole new skill set to have to learn. So all of this is to say is, it doesn't matter how like naturally gifted, talented, smart you are at your craft, at what you do in your business, at the offer you deliver, the service you deliver. If we think about what it means to be a business owner and to learn how to be a business owner and to learn how to think like a CEO, which is a completely different way of thinking than being an employee. Most of us have learned how to be really great employees. And that's great. That serves you when you're an employee. Most of us have learned to be really great students in school. That's great if you want to get great grades in school. That way of learning and being is the complete opposite of the way of learning to be a CEO, right? Like one is I need to look to someone else for directions, follow the rules, and execute on someone else's path as best as possible, right? To get the good grade or to get the paycheck that I can then rely on. One is I have to make up all my own rules, make my own path, call the shots, like learn to say where to say no, learn all the things not to do because it's busy work, right? Delegate things to other people. It's such a different way of thinking and behaving. So all of that is to say, and then I see Emma's comment here, but and I'll respond to that. All of that is to say, of course, doesn't matter how talented, gifted you are at your skill set and at what your service or offer is, of course, there's going to be a learning curve and a whole new way of being and operating when you're a business owner. So we can see if you have the curse, so to say, of the gifted entrepreneur, or if you have the curse of the gifted child, right, which is where you've just been praised all the time for how gifted and smart you are, and you have that expectation that you're just good at everything you do and it should come really easily. And then you step into a whole new way of having to operate and be from the way you've had to be your entire life outside of business, right? Most of us, unless you were raised by entrepreneurs, or started your business really early, right? Like I think I had a leg up because I acted for 10 years, which is very analogous to being an entrepreneur and to being a CEO. My dad was both a coach and a business owner, right? I was raised in that environment, so I think I had a much easier transition, quite honestly, into business and entrepreneurship. I think I actually sucked at being an employee working for other people. So I think most people don't have that experience. So unless that's your background, right? Like there's such a learning curve there. And if you have a fixed mindset where it's like, I should either know this or not, I should either be good at this or not, I should either know how to create a webinar or not, with like, who the fuck of us have ever like had to create webinars before we started a business? Maybe some of you have to create presentations in your day jobs, but definitely in a very different scope than it is to sell your own work. And usually if it's a presentation in a job, it's to deliver information, not to sell, right? A product or a service. It's like two different ways of presenting. So if you're stuck in that fixed mindset, and if you're stuck in that mindset and that expectation that I should just be good at something, and if not, I suck, or there's something wrong with me, or this isn't meant for me because I either have that talent or I don't, you can see what a hurdle this creates in business. And you can see how this would lead to a lot of procrastination, right? Like when it's like taking you forever to do something because you're trying to avoid it, or a lot of perfectionism, or a lot of overthinking, or a lot of being really mean to yourself, or a lot of imposter syndrome, right? We can see how that would all link to the other, when the truth is if you can get to the place where you realize, wait a second, of course I wouldn't know this shit. I've never done it before. This is a whole new idea. I talk so much about identity. Being an entrepreneur, being a CEO, the reason I talk about a CEO role, it's not just because I'm an ex-actress and I like to talk about roles, but it's because I know what it means to step into and embody a role, and what it means to be an entrepreneur and to be a CEO is to step into and embody a brand new identity, a brand new role. And that takes some time, right? Like that requires a growth mindset, not a fixed mindset. It takes some time to become that person. Emma says, yes, I definitely struggle with the I should already be good at this. I so appreciate you for saying that, because I think it's just so normal. And again, I will so raise both my hands that this is something I have really had to cultivate myself. I think I have really mastered a growth mindset, but I 1,000%, Emma, if this is helpful to hear, and for everyone now and on the replay, I 1,000% when I started my business, even with my background acting, I think one of the ways I sabotaged myself acting, quite honestly, I had a decent career. I did 12 commercials and 12 indie films, so I definitely got paid to act. I got to go to like South Africa and like in Italy to do jobs. I got to do some cool stuff, but I definitely sabotaged my career in multiple ways. And one of those ways I really think is because I was so stuck in that fixed mindset of you either have talent or you don't. I think I went to acting class to like hone my skill set, but I really didn't buy into the growth mindset aspect, and I think that limited the places in which I really allowed myself to grow, particularly as the CEO of an acting career. And I think at the start of my coaching practice, that was one of the biggest ways I got in my own way. Because when I didn't get a result right away, I just thought that meant I sucked. And how that showed up for me is I then just thought I sucked at this thing, or that a strategy wasn't working for me. And so my first year in business, jumped around. I had so many different offers. I had so many different strategies. Y'all, it was actually hysterical. I was like on Instagram. I don't think I started my Facebook group yet. I had a podcast, a different podcast than the one I most recently had. I was learning Pinterest. I was learning Facebook ads, even though I have never run them. But part of the reason I was ping-ponging all over the place is because if something didn't work right away, I thought I was doing it wrong, I sucked, or that strategy didn't work right. And so it created so much sabotage, and it was that expectation that like I should be able to do this and it should just give me a result immediately, as opposed to, wait a second, not only is this something new I have to learn and master, and like maybe I'm just not that good at it yet, and that can be okay, right? I think about this with content all of the time, and this is the confronting thing none of us want to think about, but like the truth is most of us just aren't that good at content when we start putting it out there. And that's not because you're not good as a business owner or your offer isn't good or you're not like, if I look even at my content from a year and a half ago, it's not that it was bad, but I think it has just improved so much more because I have a growth mindset and because it is something that is a skill set that we have to learn and master and evolve through. But I think this is a place, again, where we just expect ourselves, if we have this curse of the gifted entrepreneur, to do something once or to do something 5 times and to be the best in the world at it, right? To get the A plus, to graduate a year early like I did, like whatever the equivalent for that is, because we're such high achievers and we're so used to that kind of like quick success, as opposed to like, or maybe there's a learning curve and maybe it means that you're gonna like kind of not be that good at something and you can still get results in the meantime. But what happens is we either don't then allow ourselves to see the opportunities for growth, or we stop and start strategies, or we give ourselves a really hard time, or we never finish things, right? Or we never even put ourselves out there, we never sell the offer because of this curse of the gifted entrepreneur and that expectation. Let me know if this is landing and if this is making sense, because I want to pivot a little bit to just some of the things I work on with clients around this, because I think maybe it's a little bit not what you would expect. So I think the big thing here is learning to have that growth mindset and really leaning into that. And I think sometimes when we hear something like this, I think what we would think the solution would to almost be like, no, but you are perfect, but you are amazing, or to think it's like all about like hard accountability. And a couple of things that come up for me there that I always think about with clients is my client, like, yes, if they have enough stuff coming up there, I want to work on them with believing that they are enough. But I also want to support clients to see the places where like there is an opportunity to grow and that they can have that growth mindset and learn and master something, as opposed to almost having that, like reinforcing that expectation that they're supposed to be perfect at everything the first time they do it. I really think that is one of the biggest detrimental things we unintentionally, many of us have learned growing up, or that we can do to ourselves in business. And even as coaches, I think something for us all just to be mindful of, like, I don't think my job as a coach is to be a cheerleader to my clients. I do champion and cheerlead my clients, and I think I hold them and like see them in their potential and believe in them, and oftentimes more than they believe in themselves, and they can borrow that belief from me. But I also think that part of my job as a coach is not just to be like, yes, everything you do is perfect and great, and like, yes, every time you do something you nail it the first time around, because I think that just reinforces that fixed mindset, as opposed to like, you are doing amazing because you're showing up and you're in the process, and you're doing amazing at learning to become a CEO, and here's a gap we need to close, and here's something that we can grow and learn through, and here's something, because that is what business is. There is zero business owner I know, whether it's a client of mine, there's myself, whether it's a peer of mine who is having big success, who's making multi-6, 7 figures, I would say multi-6 and 7 figures, that isn't really understanding a growth mindset, and that isn't always both championing themselves and believing like, yes, I am good enough already, and I'm talented and I'm smart and I'm gifted, and I'm excellent at what I do, and also has that growth mindset that's always aware of the opportunity for growth and the things they can lean into and the things they can refine. I spent part of my day on Monday, I spent so much time on a funnel on the back end that's good and it's already converting, because I have a growth mindset and I know there are things that I can improve to have that convert at a higher level, to have that perform even better, right? Like, that's not because I think I'm a piece of shit or because I think I'm not good enough. That's because I think I am good enough. But I also know that like, I'm not expecting myself to do something once and for me to nail it and for that to be like the ultimate and for it to be perfect. I'm expecting myself to do something once and for it to be good enough, to get results, to get data, to get information, and then to use that information to refine it and to make it better. And that is an ongoing process in my business. And like, that is the secret to success. That is the growth mindset piece. With that, one of the things I'm trying to think of how I want to frame this. One of the things I work on with my clients because of this, as opposed to just like, yes, you're amazing, you're perfect, because of course, everyone is amazing and perfect as they are, and also, right, the growth mindset and not getting stuck in that fixed mindset and that curse of the gifted entrepreneur is so important in business. One of the things I work on with my clients quite a bit is leaning into taking messy action. And the reason I'm pausing and how I want to say this is I think sometimes when we hear the messy action or imperfect action, I think what we hear that to mean is to be sloppy or to be uncaring or to be unintentional or to do things without even without effort, right? Like, and I that is not what I mean at all. There's I posted a reel about this that really landed with people. I think it was like last week or the week before, where one of my favorite quotes and the mantras I return to personally as someone who relates to and identifies with the curse of the gifted entrepreneur, has had to do so much work around it, is a quote by the author John Green. Which, fun fact, one of my husband's best friends has been on John Green's team. He's like his right hand person and has been for over a decade, I think. Anyway, not to squirrel in tangent there, but just kind of a fun fact. But the quote is from John Green, he's an author, is essentially along the lines of, I just give myself permission to suck, and I find that hugely liberating. And that's a little bit more of what I mean by messy action. Now, when John Green says, I just give myself permission to suck, and I find that hugely liberating, when I hold that mantra, when I support my clients to take messy action, what that doesn't mean is we are trying to suck, or that we don't give a fuck, or that we don't care, or that we're not putting any intentionality, or we're not putting any action. It's actually quite the opposite. I really encourage my clients to practice deliberate practice, which is it's a whole form of taking action and practice, which is very intentional. And it is essentially after you take action to look at that immediate feedback and data, right, to see where the opportunities are to grow and improve. But in order to be able to take that kind of action, you have to give yourself permission to not have it all figured out, right? You have to give yourself permission as a CEO to be willing to test things and to not know how something's going to go. You have to give yourself permission to be a beginner or to have never done something before, and to know that your first iteration, your first 10 iterations might suck, in air quotes. And that something I always say to my clients is, if you're someone who identifies as talented, gifted, who's good at what you do, your version of sucking, your version of messy is probably better than 90% of people's 100th iteration, right? It's just the waiting for you in your mind to have it all figured out, waiting to know the answers in advance, waiting to have mastered something before you put something out, waiting until it doesn't feel messy, because there's a big difference between feeling messy and looking messy. I do not think any of my clients I'm encouraging to take messy action look messy. They look so polished and put together, but they feel messy. And if we wait until you don't feel messy, right? If we wait until you feel like you've mastered something, if we wait until you feel like you have something perfect, you're never, ever, ever, ever going to move your business forward. That will be the death of your business and of all your results. One of my other favorite quotes that I will reference all of the time, you've probably heard me share this here before, is a quote by Brooke Castillo, she's made like $50 million or something. So I think we can like take some cues from her. And she essentially says, B plus work will make you millions, A plus work will keep you broke. And I think it's just such a helpful frame. That's what we're talking about here, right? It is that mentality it is the growth mindset mentality. It is the mindset of, I have to learn how to become a CEO. Everything in my business takes deliberate practice, and I am always in the process of mastering, right? Mastery does not have an end destination where perfectionism does. If we wait for perfectionism, we will never, ever arrive, which your brain knows, which means you will procrastinate and avoid forever. If we aim for mastery, mastery does not have a destination. You are forever in mastery of something. And so it tends to always feel messy because it is something that we are always on a journey of. Hopefully that distinction makes sense. That's really what I'm supporting my clients with, because I know if I can shift them into the growth mindset, if I can shift them into being willing to feel, not be, but to feel messy, if I can shift them into giving themselves permission to suck, AKA just not be perfect and have that expectation that they're supposed to do something once and be a millionaire or have it perfect, right? If I can shift them into that, that is the very way they step into the growth mindset. That is the very way they step into learning how to think and show up like a CEO. That is also the very path that takes them to mastery, that gets them the big results. Whereas the other path will keep them stuck and broke. I'm hoping that distinction makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't, or if you have questions, because I think that's one of those things, if you can internalize this and take this in, this is like the hardest work in the world. Like, as said, from a recovering perfectionist and a recovering like person who's had the curse of the gifted child and gifted entrepreneur. So I'm not discounting the work that goes into this and how challenging this can feel if you have spent your whole life being rewarded as someone who, like, and having that expectation that you're just supposed to do something once and like nail it. I think it really is such a challenge. But if you can understand this and internalize this and start to make that shift, if you identify with this curse we're talking about, this is the difference between struggling for years in your business and being fully booked, making multi-six and seven figures. Like it really is like this piece here that shifts and changes the whole game, because this is what shifts you into being a CEO. And I'll use myself as an example. This is the shift, right? I talked so much about my early years in business. I made $800 a month to maybe $3,000 a month. I now make $30,000 to $40,000 a month with room to scale, and like I honestly think I could make more if I wanted to have a different business model, but I don't want to. But I think just to see like that shift, like what is that shift there? So much of it is going from really living into that gift of the curse of the gifted entrepreneur, and really being stuck in that fixed mindset, to learning how to shift it to that growth mindset and really think and show up like a CEO, and being willing to suck sometimes. And remembering that my sucking, it doesn't really actually suck that much, right? It's just that it isn't to my highest standard. I mean, it's not perfect or all figured out the first time around. But here's the other thing I've just really seen to be true after 8 years in business. And I think this is something that is very easy to forget when you're in the process of growing your business. I just also know there's just no one I look up to in business. There's no one who's more successful than me that is ever going to look at a failure of mine or something I didn't do perfectly or something that, like, in air quotes, suck, that's going to judge that. It's only the people who aren't. It's, what is the Brene Brown quote of, like, if you're not in the arena getting your ass kicked, I don't want, if you're sitting on the cheap seats, I don't want your opinion. Right? It's only the people who are in the cheap seats, who aren't willing to put themselves out there, who aren't willing to learn what it's like to to step into a growth mindset, who don't have a growth mindset, who aren't willing to really learn what it means to be a CEO, right? It's only those people who might ever look at something and be like, ugh, I can't believe that post wasn't perfect the first time she put it out. But honestly, most people are not paying attention nearly as much as you think they are. But that's just something that's always helped me lean into this more. There's no one who's more successful that ever is going to judge that, because anyone who's more successful than you, anyone who has success, has a growth mindset, right? And like, they've had to go through that themselves, right? If anything, they're just going to see a fellow traveler and be like, I see you, I remember that, I get you. Like, I still remember what my first live stream was like, or I still remember when I was acting that first time I did a scene, and just like how challenging that was. I still remember my first coaching call, right? And how uncomfortable that was. Like, I'm never gonna judge the person who's in the growth process. Whereas I wouldn't judge, but seeing someone who's in a fixed mindset and not willing to go through that process, I wouldn't judge them, but I would see that as just like, that sucks. Like, I feel bad for you, because that is the very thing that's going to prevent you from getting where you want to go. Whereas when I see someone who, like, even if they fall on their face, my thought is always like, good for you, because that is going to be the thing that propels you. Like, watch out, world. That's the next millionaire coming. I hope that makes sense. If you have a question, though, let me know. I do want to cover at least one more piece before I have to hop off, though. So the other piece here that I talk with my clients about quite a bit around this, I need to sip up my coffee here, is, just the last piece there. I think I said this already, but it just does feel important to say in terms of that messy action and giving yourself permission to suck. I'm just going to put a button on that thought. That is not the same as not caring or unintentional or lacking quality, right? That is not the game we're playing in business. All of my clients care so much about quality. They have very high standards, right? If anything, that's the challenge, right? We're talking about the expectation piece, the expectation to nail it the first time, the expectation to blow it out of the water the first time, the expectation to be perfect the first time, the expectation that because you're so talented, gifted, smart, right? Like, that there's never going to be a challenge or a hurdle or something to have to learn through. We're talking about the expectation and the willingness to be messy in that, and the willingness to go through the learning curve and to have that growth process. We're not saying just go throw out crap to the internet or go put a high price tag next to something that you've never tested or you don't think could help people get results, right? Like, that just to be very, very clear. Like, that is the complete opposite of what I'm talking about here. Okay, so one of the other things I talk about, two pieces here that I talk about with clients is, I think I talked about this at the beginning of the live stream, but I think it's just important to see, is one of the things I really try to help my clients understand is, if they have the curse of the gifted entrepreneur, for a lot of my clients, there is such a narrative that they have created success in their life because they are talented, or because they put pressure on themselves, or because they're hard on themselves, right? Like that's like the equation in their mind. Or it's like even like because of the anxiety or because of the worry, like that's why they have the success they've had in the past. And I really try to help my clients to see that it's not because of any of those aspects, it's in spite of those aspects, right? And so if we can get rid of the what is actually a block, a hurdle, a challenge, it's just going to open them up to have more success with a lot more ease. And I think that is it's just a hard thing to wrap your brain around, because our our brains just try to make connections all of the time, especially if these are things you learned when you were younger. As we're younger, our brain is trying to make sense of the world around us, and so it's just always making these connections. The problem is our brain both filters for repetition, so things that happen repetitively, right? Like it just sees that as truth, but our brain also just makes connections and creates a story around that. But I think we often don't realize, especially if we're 7 or 8 or 10, when our brain is really forming the subconscious mind and it's really making sense of the world, that this is a like scientific concept, or a concept when you're testing in science, that correlation does not equal causation, right? So just because two things are correlated does not mean that they cause one another. This is like why you have to be so careful when you're looking at studies and statistics that are shared with you. I'm an ex-psych major. I ace statistics, and I can tell you, I can run a statistical test to prove almost anything, right? Like just by manipulating the tests and the numbers. And what we really are always looking for, if you're looking at a study and we're looking at it the right way, is we always want to look at, is this just correlated, or is this correlation actually creating causation? But what we have to remember is just because two things are correlated does not mean one caused the other. Hopefully that term makes sense. So when we're kids, right, it's just so easy for us to make sense of the world where it's like, hey, I got praised for being smarter. Hey, I stressed myself out all of the time about getting good grades, and I got good grades. And so the brain makes this correlation where it's like, I stressed out, I got good grades, and then I got praised for getting good grades, right? And so it's very easy for the brain to say, well, my stress caused my good grades, and also my good grades caused love, caused approval, caused me to get attention, right? Like that caused all the good things that I felt, right? And eased that worry or stress. Hopefully that's making sense. But we can see, if we look back as adults, if we look back that way, we're like, well, probably worried as a kid about the test, right? That's probably not actually what caused you to get good grades, right? You probably got good grades in spite of all that worry and stress. And probably, like, yes, your parents are super proud of you for getting good grades, but that's probably not the reason they loved you, right? That's just something they were proud of you for. And so we have to start to dismantle these correlations we've made in the brain that have, because those correlations are what we then tend to paint as an adult our whole world around. And so what I see for a lot of my clients is, because of these correlations that are not causation, but the brain has these stories and thinks that they're true, right? We tend to see our whole world as my whole sense of safety, right? I'm only safe and I'm only worthy if I get the gold star, if I get the A+, if I do something, like if I do something and I show that I'm talented and gifted and like nail it the first time around, right? Like that's my whole sense of safety and worth. And also there tends to be this thing of like, I believe, or I've really created this construct that like sees this connection, that the more pressure I put on myself, the more I'm perfectionistic, the more I overthink, the more I worry, the more I stress myself out, right? The more likely I am to have that good result, right? And this idea that like I should just either nail something and that's going to get me love, safety, approval, or I suck and that's going to get me kicked out, or people aren't going to love me, right? Like there's all these stories that we have created as adults that simply are not true. But until we dismantle them, what's it? This Carl, I'm like quoting all the people today. It's the Carl Jung quote. Until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life, and we will call it fate. Right? Until we bring some of these unconscious beliefs to the conscious, it will direct our world, and we will call it fate. And that is how we will operate in our entire world. And so my work with my clients is to help them make this unconscious conscious, but also to start to dismantle it, so we can create some new narratives, so that yes, they can have a growth mindset, but also so they can start to see their whole sense of safety, their whole sense of well-being is not derived from being so gifted and talented they nail something the first time, right? Like their whole world is not going to crumble apart if they fail fail in air quotes, or if something in air quotes sucks, or if they don't get something perfect the first time, or if they have to go through a learning curve, like that's actually the path to their success and getting what they want. But similarly, some of their survival mechanisms, right? Like the high functioning anxiety, the worry, the overthinking, the procrastinating, right? Those are not actually what's ever gotten them what they want, because otherwise they're going to keep leaning on these constructs for their world, and they're going to keep creating more of the same. And what we want to see is you're stepping into a whole new world as a CEO. It is a whole new identity, is a whole new way of operating. The path to creating those bigger results for you is in learning to see how to think and how to show up like a CEO, which is having that growth mindset, which is seeing that your whole world isn't going to crumble apart if you don't nail something the first time around. In fact, that is the definition of business, right? We are always making hypotheses, testing, collecting data, refining, right? Like that is what actually creates success in business. If you look at, I promise you, if you look at any successful business, that's what's behind their success. In fact, businesses that like hit it right out of the park early on sometimes have a much harder time because they don't know what actually created their success, right? Like it almost feels like a fluke. It does feel a little bit like, I don't know how to recreate this. And they sometimes have a harder time as well because businesses will ebb and flow when there's a change in the market, or there's a challenge in their industry, or there's a challenge in their business because they don't have some of the tools and the resilience or the skill set, because they haven't had to learn through that to overcome those things. It can actually make for what feels like a very unstable and unsafe business. So, I mean, one way isn't better than the other, but just to like help normalize that and paint the picture. But I think just really starting to understand that it's not because of, it is in spite of a lot of those stories and patterns. You have created the success you have to today. And to be a CEO and to create success in business, it really does ask you to have a different mindset, a different way of showing up. And it really is a different way of operating in the world. And then the other piece with this that I find is really helpful, and this can just be helpful for all of you, and invite all of you to play with this, is understanding what actually drives results for you in your business. I think so often we get hooked into this curse of the gifted entrepreneur, into this like, I do a thing perfectly and then that's like what guarantees my safety and success, right? Into almost like that perfectionistic thinking and that expectation, because we don't actually know what is driving results in our business. And I think that's also where we can get really hard on ourselves. And I'm not calling on you, Emma, it's just because you use this as an example. And then I see Kate's comment here. That I want to respond to. But what Emma was saying about the webinar, right? Like I think if we don't know what creates results in our business, it's really easy to latch onto like one new thing that's feeling challenging or hard, like learning a webinar, like mastering a webinar presentation and putting a ton of pressure on that, or feeling like if I don't nail that the first time, like what's the effing point? Or all the things that can come up there, like you should be able to get it the first time. When you actually know what's creating results in your business, right? If you can understand that and you can see, oh, it's not the perfectionism. It's actually, I've never even done a webinar before and I've had success before. And like, it's not that this isn't going to help me, but like, actually, like I'm having success in spite of that. When you can start to see what's actually driving results and start to see it has nothing to do with the amount of pressure you're putting on yourself, or like getting things perfectly every single time, or having perfect content that like when you can start to see that and see, oh, but it is these couple of things, it can take a lot of the pressure off so that you actually can have the willingness to lean into those learning curves, to not expect yourself to like ace everything the first time you do it. So hopefully that makes sense. If I'm just trying to, so maybe this is a good example. Many of you know, I started doing reels probably the end of last year, probably November, December, probably seriously in January, and been having a lot of fun with them. Who knew? When I first started doing reels, I sucked at them. I mean, I shouldn't say I sucked. I was probably, it's kind of a word talking about. I gave myself permission to suck, and I found that hugely liberating. And I was not as good at reels in November and December as I am now. Just like I'm sure in 6 months I'll be even better at reels than I am today. And we've seen the reach and the results for them grow exponentially. What really helped me, a couple things here, is one, I'm just using this as the example here, but one, to see like my reels, they were going, like I was learning how to do them so that they would drive results, but I was having business success, right? I was already fully booked. I was already a multi-six-figure business coach, right? Like I was having success despite like having reels, and I had some low performing reels. That's my timer to remind me to wrap up this conversation because I have a client call after this. But I was having success in spite of that, right? Like I knew what was actually driving results in my business. So one of the things that drive results in my business is offering free coaching calls or having consultations, right? Or hopping on live streams, right? And giving valuable content, right? So I know what drives results in my business, which also takes some of the pressure off of learning something new. And it's not that I wasn't learning reels to create a result in my business, but I also was like, yeah, but I also know what drives results in my business. And it's not a perfect reel. It's not like if I have a viral reel or because I've never had a viral reel before my business, I don't have results, right? So it just helped take the pressure off of that. But it also helped me to look back at things like, oh, but I know one of the things that drives results in my business are live streams. And I still remember when I started doing live streams, I was petrified and I was definitely not great at them, right? Like I had a learning curve through that and they still created results for me. And so both things there, both to take the pressure off of learning something new, to see, wait, I know the other things that are creating results for me, but also I can see my learning curve through those things that have created results for me and how I was able to create results in spite of that, but it wasn't something I like nailed the first time around. That gave me a lot of freedom, permission, took the pressure off, took the expectation off, and allowed me to stay in the learning curve and the deliberate practice of doing reels for long enough to get better at them. Otherwise, I probably would have quit after 2 weeks because you feel silly when you're doing them and you feel goofy and you're not getting the response you want, right? You're not getting the results you want. So I don't know if that's the best example, but I hope that makes sense. All right, I want to see Kate's comment here and then I'm going to wrap this conversation up. Kate says, yes, had this conversation with a client just yesterday. She was putting all the pressure on because that's how she's always gotten results before, correlation versus causation. Yes, thank you so much for saying that, Kate. I think that's just helpful just to see how prevalent that is, and just it's just what our brain wants to do. And I'll use that as the way to like wrap this conversation up. I think one of my jobs as a coach, I think this is just one of those things where yes, strategy is obviously fucking important. Looking at data is important, and taking action. Like I'm excellent at that side of business with my clients, and we absolutely are doing that. But so often my job as a coach as well is to be the neutral outside observer who has a different perspective and can help my clients to see all of the false logic and false stories and false causations based on correlations that our brains kick up, because that is the most human thing in the entire world. There is not a single person on this planet that does not make false connections in their mind, that does not create false stories, that does not have false perceptions, that, I mean, in some ways we could say, if you believe it, then it's true, because we tend to create what we believe. But there is no human, like I dare you to find a human who has not decided because this is correlated, that is the causation, and has made false connections there. It's why we have a term cognitive biases. It's why when we look at an actual scientific study, people run blind and double blind studies, because we are just so biased as humans and we are so quick to make these false connections that I'm frozen here, so hopefully y'all can still hear me. It is just the most human thing in the entire world. And so I say that so that everybody can give themselves a fucking break if you're hearing this, right? This is just the most human thing in the entire world, but it's also why I have a job. And I think it's one of the biggest values as a coach, if you're a coach or if you're working with a coach, that you can ask from your coach, is to be that lens to help you see where those false connections are being made. Because when we're stuck in those false connections, when we're stuck in the curse of the gifted entrepreneur and giving ourselves those false expectations and making those false jumps in terms of what's creating results from us, that tends to be what keeps us stuck and getting in our own way. And when we can have that awareness, right, to shift that, like that's what starts to change the game. And that's how you can get more mileage out of your strategy, right? That's how you show up for your strategy. That's how you see a strategy through. That's how you think and show up as like a CEO. That's how you're willing to do the deliberate practice that lets you actually master a strategy, that lets you actually test and refine enough to get the results. So that is where I will put a pin on that conversation. But I know I froze, but I think I'm back now. I hope that this was valuable for y'all. I hope that this was permission giving. I hope this is also just helps you to see that yes, it's so beautiful that you are smart and talented and gifted. I know you are if you're watching this. And just to remember that it's not that that's not important. That is a requirement. Like that's sort of the base requirement in business. But the skill set of being a CEO and the skill set of learning to run your business like a business and the skill set that goes into creating results and money and profit in business is very different from your natural talent and giftedness. These are all learned skills. This is all a learned identity, and to give yourself permission and that grace to step into that growth mindset, to learn how to think like a CEO, to learn how to be in that role of a CEO, to learn the skills of business and to run your business like a business. And if that's something you want support with, this is literally the work I do with my clients. Yes, of course, we look at messaging and marketing strategy and sales. And we need the actual, that's part of learning the business skills, right? That's part of the growth mindset. That's part of what we have to learn how to do. But if you also want someone who's going to hold you, to help you see like where those false logics in your brain are, where those false stories are, and help really support you to learn how to be in that growth mindset and to be that CEO who is showing up to test and to refine to get those big results. I really believe that's why my clients get big results. That's why I have clients who are making $500K a year, high multi-six figures, who cross $1 million mark. That's why I've had 16 clients make 6 figures. I really think this is the piece that makes all the difference for my clients, and I think it is what I'm excellent at supporting my clients with. So if that's what you're looking for support with, I will drop a link for a free coaching consultation. I have some spots opening up this summer, and I would love to support you. I would love to champion you, but I would also love to challenge you through that growth so that you can get your own big results. All right, now I'm gonna hop off so that I can go support one of my clients in exactly this stuff. But if you're watching on the replay, if you're watching now, you have any questions, reflections, I always love to hear from you. Let me know, and I'll be back next week. And I think we do have a fun conversation slotted for next week. So I will see you then. Bye, y'all.